Welcome into an all-new betting preview for this week's U.S. Open. I'm Rick Gaiman, that right there, Andy LACC. And Andy, it feels like just days ago we were at Oak Hill for the PGA Championship because it was pretty much just a few days ago, but another major championship on our docket for this week.
Yeah, I'm just feeling really grateful for this year because I got really lucky with at least two of these venues, the two venues in the US. I have a close personal connection to both of them. In my opinion, LACC is a top 10 to 15 golf course in the world. And I've been blessed to travel and get to play a lot of the greatest golf courses. And when I say that LACC is in the true upper echelon, in my opinion, from an architecture standpoint, I really mean that. And I will be happy to place some context for the reasons why I mean that. My only concern and the only reason why I'm a bit bummed is that I hope that the conversation this week, and I hope that the questions that gets asked to players in press conferences is more along the lines of how do you feel about George Thomas's distinct bunkering style versus what are the nuances of antitrust litigation.
Right.
So I hope that this championship and major venue gets the true shine that it deserves, because I truly believe that this is the best US major venue that we have gone to in decades.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's Brookline started out very much in a similar way where a lot of the conversation was based around Live because they had just come off, their first event and it was the first time we got everybody back together. But very quickly as the week goes on, you end up finding a situation where the major championship elevates itself, the golf course elevates itself to the conversation. So that's kind of what I'm expecting again here. And let's talk about the golf course because it is Los Angeles Country Club. I'll just go through some slides and some flyovers as we kind of talk through this a little bit, but it's not a course that is going to be super familiar to the general public, right? But you kind of mentioned it. A George Thomas LA design is iconic, and now it is going to play host to the best players in the world and try to put on a test.
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of reasons why LACC is a far more distinctive golf course than pretty much anything that we see on the PGA Tour. And honestly, a lot of the time, what we see at major championship venues as well. This is a golf course smack dab in the one of the busiest streets in the country. It's off Wilshire Boulevard in the middle of Los Angeles. Essentially, the way that I would tell people to think about it is imagine if you had a top 10 golf course in the world in Central Park,
Right.
right? So we're talking about this wonderful piece of land that traverses through a canyon, like many golf courses in LA. The primary feature of this golf course is a giant barranca that
Right.
runs across the side of many holes, runs short of the green on many holes. It's a central hazard that is going to come into play both off the tee for players, both on the approach for players on certain holes as well. And Barranca is essentially a fancy name for ditch.
Yeah,
But
it's literally a dry riverbed is what it is. It's not like anything super sexy by any stretch of the imagination.
right. But why I think it's a more interesting hazard than a water hazard, for example, is that the range of outcomes on a water hazard is capped, right?
Right.
It's a penalty stroke. But if you hit the ball in the Barranca, there's a decent chance that you're going to have a really difficult time finding your ball, and you will have some sort of crazy lie where you're maybe hitting it off out of a bush. There's also a chance that you have like a really great hard pan lie off of sand too.
Right.
So the range of outcomes relating to a hazard on this golf course is far different from what we see on the PGA Tour week in and week out. You couple that with the inherent firmness of this golf course, And it's going to be a test that is truly, truly unique to this type of property.
So I think the Barranca reminds me of two things, a mix between two things. One is just top of mind at Oak Hill, the way that the what is it, Allen Creek or whatever it is, kind of like just runs through everything. Not, on number 6 at Oak Hill, it's on your right hand side on the tee shot, and then it kind of weaves around and out on the left hand side on your approach shot, and it becomes a feature of so many of those holes. And it almost reminds me a little bit of Kiowa, where when you're off the fairway and you're into that hard pan, you're just kind of at the luck of the draw of what you get. You might get a decent lie. You might get a ball in a footprint. You might get a ball that rolls for 40 yards, and is behind a tree, right? There's a randomness aspect to it. And that's kind of what the Barranca reminds me of. And it's definitely more prevalent, Andy, I think on the front nine around LACC. And it's going to be something you hear about constantly throughout the week.
Yeah. Be careful if Barranca is the staple of your drinking game this week on the telecast.
You will not make it very long into the coverage. Yeah.
And the other thing that I would hit on as it relates to the Barranca and the hazards on this golf course is something I talk about a lot. I talk about a lot in the podcast I have coming out tomorrow with Joseph Olmania about the idea of the consequence of misses. And the reason why I believe that this venue will be the USGA setups in the past, Rick, especially at golf courses like Winged Foot and Torrey Pines. And honestly, a lot of PGA Championship setups as well, because Oak Hill fell into this bucket. But a lot of recent US major championships have turned into pure driving contests. And the reason why I'm so excited about LACC is that this, in my opinion, is going to be the least of a pure driving contest that we have seen from a US Open venue in quite some time. I mean, this is a US Open venue where, in my model, I'm not weighing distance off the tee, which would be unheard of at a golf course like Torrey Pines or Winged Foot. Now, that doesn't mean that distance is advantageous, but because of the firmness of this golf course, this is going to play a lot shorter. And I think people are going to miss this and get confused because they're going to see the gaudy scorecard numbers in the 290-yard par threes and think that this is a bomber's paradise. And the firmness of this golf course, in my opinion, is going to allow more different styles to compete than we have seen at previous US Opens in the past, where you have this super, super thick rough, not a lot of thick rough on this property. And when there is thick rough, it's more so around the greens than it is on the fairways. So I actually think that this golf course is going to provide more of a unique and more of a complete test than we have seen on USGA setups in the past that just totally, you can't compete unless you drive at 320.
Yeah, I actually find the driving on this golf course a couple of things. I find it to be more strategic than most, right? You're going to have some of these fairways are wide by number, but the way that they are undulated or the way that they are angled, right?
Yeah.
They will play effectively a lot smaller. And then you'll find situations where, for example, if you are on the right-hand side of the fairway, you might not have a look at the green, or it'll be a blind shot into a green. But if you're on the left-hand side, you'll be kind of higher up on the perch. You'll have a good look at it. So I think a couple of things. I think the driving aspect of it is more strategic than I think people will realize early in the week. And then also, I think there's a pretty strong it's almost like a strong connection between what you're able to do off the tee and what you're able to do on approach, right? Because one almost has to complement the other. That tee shot is really going to increase the range of difficulty of your approach shots, which I find them to be uniquely connected in a way that not many other or not a lot of golf courses on the schedule are.
Yeah. And a lot of that is because, just to compare it to the last major championship venue that we saw a month ago, if Colin Morikawa misses the fairway by 2 yards at Oak Hill, a fairway that he probably wasn't going to hit too often of the time anyway, because it was so pinched in, And if Rory McIlroy or Bryson DeChambeau misses that same fairway by 20 yards, the consequence of Morikawa's 2-yard miss versus the consequence of Rory's 20-yard miss, there's not that big of a difference, to
Right.
be honest with you. With all the trees that they took out at Oak Hill, you still are going to have an angle to the green. And that's why we saw Rory McIlroy with a two-way miss, having no idea where his driver was going, losing to 6 players at Oak Hill. That is not LACC. A 2-yard miss, if Colin Morikawa misses his target by 2 yards, he's going to be in the fairway with a really awesome angle to that green potentially. If Rory McIlroy misses his target by 20 yards, he might be staring triple in the face.
Right.
And what I think is so wonderful about LACC is that at Oak Hill, it was a pars and bogeys course, right? Like the strategy was very distinctive. It was what Brooks did: aim 30 yards left or right of every pin, try and two putt, hope you make a couple 15 to 20 footers, lot of pars and bogeys.
Right.
LACC is more of a birdies and doubles course. There's more scoring opportunities at LACC because of the half concept, the half par hole concept that George Thomas essentially invented, which is a whole different podcast. But there's more birdie holes at LACC than Oak Hill, in my opinion. There's also more double holes at LACC than Oak Hill, in my opinion, because of what I just talked about in the consequence of misses idea. And that is going to make, Rick, what I believe potentially to be, one of the best major championships that we've seen in years from a viewing perspective because of that variance.
Right. Well, let's start putting some names to it here. So here's the odds grid. This is from Odds Checker, so you can see kind of across the industry what is available to you. And Scotty Scheffler is the favorite, 7.5 to 1 to win the U.S. Open, with some big names right behind him: Brooks Koepka and Jon Rahm at 11 to 1, Rory McIlroy at 13, Patrick Cantlay at 17, and the only other name consensus below 20 is Victor Hovland. So there's a lot to unwrap here. Andy, where do you want to start?
Well, I think we should start with the big three.
Okay.
Scheffler, Brooks, and Rahm. Do I see Rahm creeping up to 11 at some spots, huh?
So there's one spot, it's FanDuel, where Rahm is at 11. He is, good call. He is basically an 8 or 9 to 1 everywhere else. So maybe he should be closer to the conversation of Scotty than to Rory in the odds department.
Sure. Well, I may be going out on a limb here by saying that Rahm is actually my favorite of those three. I just think that his track record on the West Coast is so incredibly impressive, whether it be at Torrey Pines or in Phoenix or, in Palm Springs or at Riviera. All these, he's obviously comfortable there. He's talked about being comfortable there as it related to him winning the US Open at Torrey Pines and going to college in Phoenix. But what Rahm is doing from a course fit standpoint, I really love his course fit at LACC, but also how well he is still hitting the ball, which is getting obviously overshadowed by the fact that Scotty Scheffler is hitting the ball better. But I just think Rahm's a smoking gun here. And I know this isn't a DFS conversation, but I don't think there's a shot in hell that he's as highly owned as Scotty. I'd be surprised if he's as highly owned as Brooks coming off a win at the PGA. But my concern with Scotty on this golf course, and it's hard. We're nitpicking here, right? We're basically asking ourselves to say, okay, can you think of anything that would cause us to not make a bet on a historic ball striker right now at 7 to 1, which is a tough number to swallow. That's basically it for me. The way that I structure my betting card, if I'm betting Scotty, it's Scotty one and done for me. I think LACC is a really challenging course to putt on. And it has been compared to Augusta. and which I like as well because of the slope and the undulation of some of these greens. I have played LACC multiple times, and it is a golf course where you are going to get, there isn't a flat putt on the golf course. You're going to get a lot of break on some of these 20 footers. And you look at Scheffler's, and US Opens always get talked about as you're going to have more 5 to 10 footers for par at US Opens than you will at any other event on the schedule. And I look at the way Scotty is putting it right now from 5 to 10 feet. And I just think that he is going to have, this is a golf course that is going to expose you on the greens if you do not have a lot of confidence. I mean, I think you could get going sideways in a very quick direction on these greens because of the slope and the undulation to them and the amount of inherent 5 to 10 footers for par that you are going to have at a US Open venue. I would give the edge to Rahm at the top. And that is the best reason that I can think of to fade probably the best ball striking run that we've seen ever in the strokes gained era. Right.
Yeah, I mean, averaging Scotty's averaging 15 strokes gained from tee to green over his last like 10 starts. It's pretty shocking. And despite, I mean, you're right, the putting struggles are nasty, but he still finds a way towards the top of the board. You wonder how exasperated that gets at a place like LACC. I'll tell you what, I don't even know. It would be a tough click to get to Scotty or to John Rahm. I will probably end up getting there on one of them, but I have to admit, I mean, I'll just loop in Xander here.
Yeah.
I think it's Xander time, right?
It's my pick to win since December.
Yeah, I think he's long overdue. What he's done at major championships, I was diving a little bit into it earlier a couple of days ago, and he gains just 10 strokes to the field at seemingly every major championship that he plays, and he's doing it at a rate that is just it's almost not possible that he hasn't won one of these yet. And now he's coming in form as not only incredibly well rounded, but just ball striking the hell out of it. There's going to be a lot of talk about Colin and, a West Coast guy. There's going to be a lot of talk about Max Homa being a West Coast guy. Don't forget about this one right here. Right. I mean, I just
Cantlay too at UCLA.
Yeah.
I've even heard the Modesto, California thing with Bryson, which I just want to flag is about 5 hours farther away from Los Angeles than San Diego is. One of my biggest pet peeves is how liberal we get with the home game narrative. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Xander will be as comfortable as anyone in the field this week in Los Angeles.
Yeah. So he's currently right there around 20 to 1. What are we going to do with, if there are people out there who are like, oh man, I see a 13 to 1 on Rory at a major championship. That's probably longer than we've gotten on Rory in a long time. Or if we're talking about breakthrough opportunities for maybe Victor Hovland to get his first, maybe Xander Schauffele to get his first. Shouldn't we be talking about Patrick Cantlay to get his first at 17 to 1? I mean, it's a loaded top of the board with guys outside of Rory, and Rory's still playing good enough golf, who are all playing some great golf right now.
Yeah. So of that trio that you mentioned, Cantlay's my favorite. I'll tell you my concern with Rory, which I already hinted at before, is that I think that he could find himself in some big time trouble on this golf course if the driver is not dialed in. Now, the driver looked really good at Memorial. It's looked really good in Canada. It's actually been the iron play that has been a bit of more of a concern with him in the last 2 starts. But again, with these top guys, you're looking for something that you can hang your hat on as to why not to irresponsibly bet all of them. And my case against betting Rory would be that I think that some of the mistakes that he was able to get away with at Oak Hill, he will not be able to get away with at Los Angeles Country Club. I think that Oak Hill was a better course fit for Rory than LACC. Doesn't mean that he can't win. I mean, I still think that he's live as hell and a very intriguing DraftKings option as well, based on what the public perception does kind of come in on him as we get later in the week. But that would be my argument against him. With Cantlay, I may bet Cantlay. And I know that that is sacrilegious to some who have given up on him at major championships. And that's fair to me. I get that. If you have wasted a lot of money on Cantlay at major championships and you are just in show me mode, I understand that. I have wasted some, not a ton on Cantlay, and I feel your pain. He is the second best driver of the ball in the world right now. He has shot 61 at 62 actually at Los Angeles Country Club in the 2012 Pac-12 championships. He is, from a statistical standpoint, when you factor in everything, including putting, probably the most well-rounded golfer in the world, right? Xander's 1B, Rahm is close up there too. And LACC, in my opinion, is more of a complete test than we have seen at recent US Open venues. Short game is going to be so important here.
Yeah.
Putting confidence, and Cantlay is the best bent grass putter in the world, is going to be so important here. I'm pretty damn close on Cantlay. And then if you're asking me finally, sorry for being long-winded, I want to get something on all three. With Hovland, my one concern with Hovland, Rick, is that there is a specific chipping technique that he appears to have dialed in on golf courses like Oak Hill and Muirfield Village. And I do not think that he will be able to go to that chipping technique at Oak Hill. There's so much more short grass around the greens at LACC than there was at Oak Hill and there was at Muirfield Village. And that kind of dumpy swipe that he has actually gotten so good at golf courses like Oak Hill and Muirfield Village, where he's able to pop the ball up out of thick greenside rough, he is going to have to employ a far different chipping technique at a golf course like LACC. So my concern is for all of those people that are saying Hovland's short game is fixed right now. He's figured out something on a specific style of golf course is what I would counter that with. I'm not 100% there that he has the creativity and the shot making required around the greens that he might need at LACC. Is that fair as a Hovland truther?
Sure, of course it is. Yeah, and the short game is, as with most things, it's very much still a work in progress, right? And they're still very much going to, like, he did not solve it overnight, right? Yes, he's made gains periodically over time, but there are and we've talked about this before, where a year ago he had one shot around the greens, and now he's got like three. And that's three times as good. But like some of the good guys have like 10 shots, you know what I mean? Like, so there is still room for improvement. So I do think it is fair when you consider, and I love the contrast to Oak Hill, especially because it was recent, it was top of mind. The success that he saw there. The one thing I will put a bow on that entire conversation with is, you said if you've lost a lot of money on Patrick Cantlay at major championships and you're ready to give up, well, I'm not sure you should give up right now. I mean,
I don't think so either.
His last four majors are like his best four majors that he's had. So maybe he is starting to figure something out. And now your money is worth reinvesting after that. So there's a pretty big gap here, Andy. So you get like Xander at 20, and then on the grid, Jordan at 29 is the next. Jordan Spieth, Cam Smith at 30, Colin at 32. You lump in Max Homa, Tony Finau, Matt Fitzpatrick, Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, all short of 40. This is where the natural, I guess, second click would come from. I'm honing in on maybe Jordan.
Yeah.
But I will probably not get involved here.
Yeah. If I end up betting Xander and Cantlay, I'm not going to have room for Spieth. But if I forego one of Xander and Cantlay, it's Jordan Spieth for me.
Yeah.
This is the best U.S. Open venue for him since Chambers Bay.
Agreed.
He has figured out something with the driver.
Mm-hmm.
This is another thing I talked about on a podcast coming out tomorrow. For a player to gain 6 strokes off the tee at Oak Hill and 4.5 strokes off the tee at Muirfield Village without being top 15 in the field in distance, that is, and Jordan Spieth doesn't get enough credit for his distance. He's plenty long. But to be able to gain over 10 strokes off the tee in 8 rounds at those 2 golf courses, which inherently, especially Oak Hill, help, but it's easier for bombers to gain strokes off the tee at those
For
2
sure.
golf courses. I mean, Spieth has got the ball on a string right now. He's driving it long and he's driving it straight. His iron play is really good. His short game, we talk about that creativity.
Yes. That
Just
creativity, Andy, there is a lot of creativity around LACC. There's a lot of
oh yeah.
options there, especially around the green. You will use, guys are going to have to hit the ball and know what it's going to do after it hits the ground. This is not TrackMan golf by any stretch of the imagination, right? There is going to be a lot of creativity, a lot of artists, and that nobody better than Jordan Spieth in that department.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the idea of the ball hitting the ground at LACC and how much more the ball is going to be on the ground at LACC because of the firmness. This is a style of golf that Spieth has had a ton of success on before. You talk about the Augusta comp, you talk about the Chambers Bay, shades of Chambers Bay and LACC, open championships where the ball's on the ground and there's not going to be wind at LACC, but it's going to be really firm turf. It's going to be close. I belong to a golf course here that has the same agronomy as LACC and it's right down the road. And it starts getting really firm this time of year, like really hard pan St. Andrews-esque. And I think that plays right into Jordan Spieth's hands. So once we get past 20-1, he's my favorite pick on the board.
After that, you start to get obviously longer odds, but maybe some more question marks in the game. We don't have to roll through all these guys or all these tiers, Andy, but is there someone or someones that you think outside that 40-1 range is worth an investment on this week?
I do. Can I backtrack us for 1 second and get your 25-second opinion on Cam Smith?
Oh boy. So I think that in the way that Jordan Spieth will rely on creativity and that open championship kind of style of golf is going to be better at this US Open than many other US Opens. I think that's good. I know that distance is not going to be a prerequisite for success, but he really doesn't drive it all that well or all that accurately either.
Yeah.
And I worry that so I could see this going both ways. He is going to have to separate himself on and around these greens, which they're difficult, and he might be able to do that. I just worry that the much more narrow path to the top is not as good, while Jordan Spieth at the same number has a much wider path and a much better skill set, I think, for this place than Cam Smith does.
I agree. I prefer Spieth to Smith. And for the same reasons that we have concerns about Rory McIlroy's driving accuracy here and his big misses, you got to apply that to Cam Smith and say, okay, if Cam Smith has a B+ driving accuracy week, he's probably going to finish top 10.
Sure.
If Cam Smith has a C driving accuracy week, he's probably going to miss the cut by a lot.
Yeah.
That's how much variance is created by the consequence of misses here. So, okay, I just wanted to touch on him too, because I think he's somewhat interconnected to Jordan Spieth and going to be a very popular option this week.
Yeah. So going further down, you get into Sung Jae and Bryson's at 50, Ricky Fowler's at 66, Tommy Fleetwood at 70, but as short as 46 if you're looking at the grid. So you might be able to shop some of these numbers as well. Where do we go here, and how much exposure to this part of the board do we actually want?
I mean, you have 3 guys that, I burn so much money on in Lowry, Rose, and Fleetwood. And all 3 of them make a lot of sense on firm golf courses and in tough conditions. Fleetwood is probably my favorite. I've had Fleetwood penciled in here for since December. I talked about him. I said there's a ton of Shinnecock here. There's some Southern Hills agronomically in here, where he also finished top 5. I think the 70 on Fleetwood is one of the better bets that you can make above 50-1 this week. But you know, what have we seen at US Opens, Rick, in the past? It's like, I think 7 or 6 of the last US Open winners were in the top 10 in the world. 10 of the last 10 were in the top 30 in the world. So I would say, if I'm looking for guys down here, it's Fleetwood, it's Lowry, it's Rose, but I wouldn't get too wild. There's maybe one guy that I would mention as we get a lot deeper, but don't get too liberal with your selections down here.
Yeah, I'm building a pretty top heavy card for this week. I think that he probably won't win, but I am interested to see what Joaquin Niemann does, as short as 50, as long as 90, goes wire to wire at Riviera. It's hard to get a better beat on him because he's been playing on live, and we don't have the advanced metrics every single week. But I don't mind his shot shaping, his ability to kind of work it in multiple directions, and he's longer than people think. But I think you're right. Like, if we're talking purely outrights, is Keith Mitchell going to win a U.S. Open?
No.
This one, probably not, right? Keegan Bradley, who, by the way, is as short as 66, as long as 125. I love Keegan. Is he going to win this one? Probably not. You know what I mean? So who's that long guy that you were teasing us with?
Have you gotten a chance to take a look at what Mito Pereira is doing from a ball striking standpoint? And I know the stats on live are, very proprietary, but this is a guy that, I mean, even just look at his ball striking numbers from the PGA Championship and Masters.
Yeah.
The guy gained over 7 strokes ball striking at the first 2 majors of the year.
Yeah.
And he's contended on a major with the exact, I mean, when I say contended, he had the trophy in his hands on the 18th tee.
They started engraving it. Like, their MI were already on the trophy.
on a golf course with wider landing areas and the exact same agronomy as LACC and a Gil Hanse redesign. So, if you're looking for one bet over 100-1, it's Mito, in my opinion, unequivocally. Siwoo Kim too, and I kind of like Woodland, but Mito is the guy for me.
So first 2 major championships this year of guys who have played both of them, strokes gained ball striking. It's Scotty Scheffler, Brooks, Cantlay, Mito. That's the list. So I mean, hard to put the full picture together, but we've played 2 majors, and the same way that we use that information for what Brooks Koepka has been doing, like, Mito's statistically been phenomenal as well. What's his number? 120.
120.
20. Yeah.
$5 worth $5.
Yeah. Put $5 on it. And if he misses the cut, no problem. And if he's in the mix, you have a nice little sweat. Okay. So let's talk one and done. Well, you know what, before we do that, what we're actually going to do is I'm going to reset. I'm going to pull some numbers, pull some data, look at our one and done, and we will reconvene this conversation after a quick word from Andy's podcast. Andy LACC is one of the nerdiest golf guys that I know, and I mean that as an absolute compliment. His knowledge of course architecture allows him to create some of the most actionable course previews available, and he offers up pure expertise on his own podcast, the Inside Golf Podcast. Twice a week, he offers course breakdowns, DFS, and betting strategy for every PGA Tour event, and he expands the universe by bringing on entertaining and knowledgeable guests who can offer a different viewpoint of the game that we love. Follow Inside Golf Pod on Twitter and download Inside Golf wherever you download podcasts. And we're back. So I have not seen the purse yet. I know that they don't have to. I think last year they announced it on Friday. So like it could be a bit, but last year's was 17.5 million. Matt Fitzpatrick got 3.1 million. So it's not going down, right? Like, so it's going to be 3 million at least for the winner of this one and done. Now, I think in major championships, Andy, there's kind of two basic strategies. It's like, do you want to use a live guy? Because that gives you a heck of a lot of flexibility on being able to save a PGA Tour guy for the rest of the way, and it starts to feel like we're in crunch time very, very quickly here? If so, do you have one left that you'd be willing to use? Because if you burned Brooks and DJ 1-2, would you use Cam Smith here? Would you use? I mean, I don't think you want to go as far as Mito, do you? You know what I mean? Like, let's start there. If you have already used Brooks and Dustin, would you play a different live guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably depends on what your position is. I would say that probably a lot of the folks that didn't use Brooks at the PGA are gonna look at themselves and say, okay, I I gotta use Brooks now. Especially with the success he's had at US Opens in the past and firm US Opens like Aaron Hills and Shinnecock with some width. So I think that Brooks and Cam Smith is already getting a lot of buzz based on the course fit. I think there's a decent chance that those two are the highest owned one and done options, because there's no way that Scotty, Rory, Rahm, none of those guys are above 30%, 25% left, right? You got to imagine.
Right. So this is very much now, it's just a puzzle, right? So what puzzle pieces do you have available, and what spots are still available? Do you have Scotty Scheffler? Do you have John Rahm? If you do, roll them out. Sure. What do I care? Right. Like, this is going to be one of the better spots for him. If you don't, where does that leave you? I think that in a vacuum, and we've already kind of talked about this, I'm happy to use Xander Schauffele if I have him available. And I might, right?
And I will.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And Xander's weird, because when you think of him, you think, okay, I can use him anywhere, but he doesn't have like one perfect spot, which is kind of the beauty of him. So there is a chance you have gotten this far and still have him available.
And if he did have one perfect spot, you'd probably argue that it would be USGA setups where he hasn't finished outside of the top 12 in 6 appearances. So, as it regards to yours and I's one and done, did you use Xander?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So I've got the green light.
I used him at the PGA Championship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
mine.
Yeah. So you're going to use Xander. I'm going to use Brooks for us. I think I have to at this point. If you were really looking to make up ground, how far would you be? And I don't think you have to go. The sneaky little thing about majors is that there are so many good options that a lot of the ownership does get spread out a little bit. So, what about like, we haven't talked about Tony Finau. Like, would you Tony Finau? If we had to assign a grade or a score to Tony Finau out of 10, with 10 being, green light, I love everything about him. Like, where does Tony rank this week for you?
I like Tony Finau a lot, probably more than consensus. And I do think that it's a bit of a decent buy low spot based is another guy that finished top 5 at Shinnecock, I believe. So, I would go down to Finau. If you have Finau, I would imagine he's used by a lot of people, but that's that range of Finau, Spieth, and maybe you want to save Spieth for Liverpool, which might end up being a better fit for him if you've got Spieth left. But like, as much as I love the Fleetwood, Lowry, Rose zone at a US Open, I don't even know if I'd go that deep, because, there's a 100% chance that you have one of Finau, Spieth, Morikawa, Homa. And if by some chance you don't have one of those guys, then there's 100% chance that you have one of Cam Smith or Brooks, probably. So I don't even think you need to go at a major championship, for better or worse. And I've struggled in one and done this season. So maybe you want to not take my advice. I'm not going past 35-1. I'm just not.
Yeah. And it's fair. It is a valid point. We'll end on this, that, you have one of Brooks DJ, or Cam Smith available, because you could only use those 3 guys in 2 spots, so you could not have used them all by now. So you have at least one of them available, which is an interesting little footnote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andy, it's going to be a phenomenal tournament. I cannot wait for it to start. Cannot wait to see you out there, and we'll figure out our dinner plans and such for the week. But I'm very much looking forward to it. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? Anything else that we missed?
I just, like I said, I really hope people can focus on the golf this week, because it's going to be the most fun, unique test of golf that we have seen in years. And based on what I know about the LACC membership, I don't know if we're going to get this golf course again. I don't know how often we're going to get this golf course again. There's not many US Open available slots in the next 30 years.
Yeah.
So enjoy this one. Soak it in. It's not very often. The list is one where you get a top 10 golf course in the world in a top 5 city in the world.
Yeah.
Right. That list is like one.
Yeah.
So in the middle of a, top 5 city in the world, arguably. So enjoy it, soak it in. I'm about as excited for this one as I have been ever.
Follow Andy on Twitter at ADPLAC Sports. You can find me at RickRunGood. This has been your betting preview for the US Open. Good luck.